the Democrats and the Republicans in the Senate got together and miraculously, after decades of lethargy and indifference and sandbagging and sabotage, arrived at a border compromise package with billions of dollars of new investment for Border Patrol officers, immigration and asylum judges, better surveillance and detection technology for fentanyl and other kinds of drugs. And then the fourth branch of government, Donald Trump, acting with the fifth branch of government, Vladimir Putin, blew up the whole package. Why? Because Donald Trump doesn't want a border solution. He wants a border problem to run on. And of course, Vladimir Putin doesn't want $60 billion going to President Zelensky and the people of Ukraine trying to defend their land and their people and their institutions. And so they just wrecked the whole thing.
Your beautiful Democrat bastions of socialism, these cities are destroyed. And all the Democrats now think this is a problem. Just a year ago, the administration was saying, there's no problem. There's no problem. The southern border is secure. The southern border is secure. Literally, the vice president, the president repeatedly said this. President Trump is not the person that caused this. It is President Biden. And the fact that President Biden said that it's Trump's fault is the most ridiculous thing in the whole world.
I'm sorry, my colleague just exited the room. He offered some provocative suggestions. One was in talking about our beautiful democratic bastions of socialism. I'm not quite sure what he's referring to, but certainly not the ugly bastions of communism that Donald Trump celebrates every day, like his man crush, the dictator of North Korea, or Vladimir Putin, the former chief of the KGB, who's his clear puppet master, or the Chinese leader Xi, who Donald Trump has praised more than 20 times in tweets or X's or whatever he sends out to the world.
President Biden and his administration have refused to take any responsibility for the catastrophe they created. And now the Biden administration is doing what it does best, asking taxpayers for more money. But more money isn't going to solve much on the border, because what we are seeing isn't a money problem. It's a policy problem. It's a problem of not enforcing U.S. immigration law. No amount of money can fix bad policy. Our solutions are simple. Illegal activity on the border must be met with adequate and timely consequences, not a quick release to await years-long removal proceedings where hundreds of thousands of aliens file frivolous or fraudulent applications that create delays for those who truly qualify.
It's become obvious that Trump's party doesn't want immigration solutions at the border. They want immigration problems to run against. The other main issue they used to demagogue, abortion, is no longer available to them because the country's negative response to the Supreme Court's destruction of Roe versus Wade in 2022 demonstrates this is still a country that prizes freedom, rejects theocratic repression, and opposes the MAGA Republicans' eagerness to pass a national law banning abortion rights. So they can't talk about those plans anymore. The cat's got their tongue.
Madam Speaker, I rise in strong support of HRES 863, impeaching Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. My Democrat colleagues argue that one cannot be impeached over policy differences. Well, I argue that breaking our laws is more than just policy differences. 300 dead Americans every day from fentanyl poisoning is more than just a policy difference. It's murder. He has violated his oath of office and breached the public trust by willfully refusing to ensure the laws passed by Congress and signed into law by the President are faithfully executed as required by Article 2 of the Constitution. He has allowed over 10 million illegal border crossers to invade our country, approximately 2 million of whom are known gotaways. These are people who have completely evaded U.S. authorities and are roaming the interior of the American communities, assaulting, raping, and murdering Americans. And God help us if we have a terrorist attack on our land.
The Trump-Putin mega faction, headed up by the distinguished gentlelady from Georgia, has been given this worthless trinket of a consolation prize, the opportunity to bring a slapstick impeachment drive against a cabinet member of unimpeachable integrity who has obviously committed no treason, no bribery, no high crimes, no misdemeanors, nothing indictable or even indictable, if you prefer.
There is a reason that last week's hearing, the university presidents of Harvard, Penn, and MIT made history as the most watched congressional testimony in history with over 1 billion views. It was pathetic, amoral, and inhumane, and by God, the world heard it. And as I said in the hearing, it does not depend on the context. As attacks against Jewish students have skyrocketed on campuses across America, we clearly have tremendous work ahead of us, Mr. Speaker, to address this rot of anti-Semitism that is now rooted in our once premier higher education institutions. And we will not be deterred by this important work.
Now, I hold no brief for the college president's overly legalistic, ethically tone-deaf answers awkwardly advanced in response to Ms. Stefanik's rapid-fire yes-no questions. It should not be difficult for anybody to say that in the age of rampant gun violence and lax Republican gun laws, which have put tens of millions of AR-15s into circulation in our society, anyone calling for genocide of the Jews or anyone else should be sent immediately a campus security detail to see if they pose the risk of harm to other people or if they need an immediate mental health exam. And if there's not an imminent threat, surely the call for genocide of the Jews by definition constitutes a hostile learning environment and should occasion aggressive disciplinary action. So where was the common sense on the part of the college presidents? But where is the common sense in the Congress of the United States of America? Calling for the resignation of private individuals at private universities would be a dramatic and unprecedented departure for the U.S. Congress, which has never before voted to tell a college president to resign. Before we affix this lifelong stigma, reproach, and dishonor on a private citizen, do you think perhaps we should offer them some kind of due process? The kind of due process that even George Santos got and that Donald Trump is getting all over America right now for his 91 federal and state felony charges? I rise to oppose this resolution, which to my knowledge would mark the first time in American history that the House of Representatives would vote to tell private college and university presidents to resign. I want all of my colleagues to think very seriously about what this means for us today and in the future. We're all profoundly disturbed by the resurgence of anti-Semitism and racism in campus towns, including death threats, serious death threats against Jewish students at Cornell, and actual shootings and attempted murder of 3 Palestinian American students in Burlington, Vermont. We all want to express our outrage in House resolutions, which we've done more than 20 times as a House of Representatives, and numerous times even since October 7th. For example, on November 2nd, we passed House Resolution 798, which condemned all forms of anti-Semitism on college campuses, denounced any support for terrorist groups on campus, reaffirmed the free speech rights of Jewish students and faculty, and urged enforcement of federal civil rights laws to protect Jewish students against anti-Semitism. So why do we need this resolution? Well, the only thing new about it is that it would have the U.S. House of Representatives call specifically for the resignation of 2 college presidents, a call that has been slipped in at the bottom of page 2 of the resolution. This extraordinary passage comes close to being what the Constitution calls a bill of attainder, which is the unconstitutional imposition by Congress on a specific citizen or citizens of a criminal punishment or stigma by the Congress itself. Although this resolution is not a criminal punishment or stigma against specific citizens, it is undoubtedly a civil punishment and stigma against specific American citizens. How many of you would like the president of the college where you went or where your children go to be walking around with a congressional resolution telling them to resign? Everyone knows that this will be an academic scarlet letter and a professional death sentence for anyone carrying it around. Does anyone think that UPenn's President Liz McGill, who's already resigned in the face of Ms. Stefanik's ceaseless campaign to force her out, will ever be able to find another college presidency? Give me a break. Should Harvard President Claudine Gay, who was the first Haitian American ever to serve in that position, and Sally Kornbluth, who is Jewish, get the chance to explain what they are actually doing to combat racism and anti-Semitism at their schools, and what they have done in their lives and in their careers to oppose anti-Semitism and racism, which are the gateway to destruction of liberal democracy? Do we care about that? Or is this just a bunch of drive-by talking points? Is it relevant that the Harvard and MIT boards have made unanimous statements affirming the leadership of their two college presidents? Are we saying that their boards don't matter or they are indifferent to anti-Semitism? And the leaders of the Freedom Caucus know better than the Jewish president of MIT what anti-Semitism is? Now, I know these two were the presidents testifying before Ms. Stefanik, but are we sure that these two are even the worst in the country when it comes to bias and discrimination? Is this a one-shot deal, or, as Ms. Stefanik promises, is this just the beginning? Are we going to go through all the college and university presidents in America? And what about the CEOs of the businesses? Maybe they are not performing to her satisfaction either. And indeed, maybe there are college presidents who've looked the other way in not hypothetical cases of anti-Semitism and racism, but real cases of anti-Semitism and racism. What about them? Are we going to let them go, or are we going to go after them? Maybe we should determine who the worst are before we start using the resources of the House of Representatives to call for people to resign. Are there college presidents, by the way, who looked the other way when there was sexual abuse of college male wrestling team members, rape of students, or female gymnasts, or female soccer players? Are we interested in that now that we are superintending higher education in America? Now that we are the appellate review board for the colleges?
Has expired.
I'd like to request one more minute.
Members are reminded to direct their remarks to the chair. Gentleman is recognized.
Additional 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, are we prepared to become the National Academic Appeals Panel for college presidents, coaches, and professors? Or is that perhaps best left to the universities themselves? Maybe it's that we just don't have a positive legislative agenda of our own to lower drug prices in America, to get aid to our democratic allies in Ukraine against fascist imperialist thug Vladimir Putin. Maybe we don't have anything real to do, so we decide instead to go around and start lecturing to college presidents and college boards all over America. In the absence of a real program for America, the majority is filling our hours with censures, expulsions, motions to vacate the speakership, overthrow their own leaders, and of course impeachment of President Biden. For what? For doing nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. That's all that they give us. And this cannibalistic instinct they've unleashed now turns on private citizens, academic leaders who will wear the scarlet letter A so they can have some more press conferences. I'm voting no on this resolution. I yield back and thank the chair.
My time has expired, so I recognize my friend and colleague, Mr. Raskin, for 5 minutes for a question.
Thank you kindly, Chairman Higgins, and wonderful to be here with you. It may just be you and me left here on Capitol Hill. Our colleagues seem to have made their way to the airport. But I'm glad we're going to get a chance to discuss this after a very eventful week or two. I believe the Speaker sent us into recess. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Higgins, but I think that we're going to be away for a couple weeks now. But here's where I think we are, and Mr. Hauser, I wanted to get... Sorry?
You can stay.
Oh, good. I appreciate that. Democracy and freedom are under siege all over the world right now. And we have terrorists in the Middle East. We have Vladimir Putin, who has executed a filthy, bloody, imperialist invasion of Ukraine to destabilize their democracy and take over their country. We have the communist bureaucrats of China destabilizing the Indo-Pacific. And so President Biden has said we need to get aid, $60 billion to our allies in Ukraine, who are under the gun with Russian military drones and attacks on civilians. The Israeli government is responding to Hamas's brutal terrorist atrocities of October 7th. We have a besieged, suffering population in Gaza, which would be the partial recipient of $10 billion going out in humanitarian relief, both to Gaza and to people in Ukraine, and then money also going to the Indo-Pacific. But what we heard from the Republicans is, no way, we're not going to help our Democratic allies and besieged peoples all over the world unless we deal with the border first. To the shock and dismay of Senator McConnell and the Senator Lankford, the other ultra-conservative Republican senators who spent time negotiating that deal and getting the vast majority of everything they wanted, and you've got the Republican leaders in the Senate saying we will never get a better deal than this, and they destroyed it because Donald Trump didn't want it, and so everybody got in line like a bunch of lemmings and walked the cliff with Donald Trump. And I think what happened in the 3rd District of New York, replacing Mr. Santos with our colleague Tom Suozzi, demonstrates to them what America understands. They think America doesn't understand. America does understand who was serious about the border and immigration and who is serious about defending democracy and freedom in our allies around the world. Now, I want to ask you the question, Mr. Hauser. Am I properly characterizing what happened in the Senate and what's in that package?
Sir, from what I've read concerning the bipartisan bill, it was a great step forward in a lot of regards. Not only in the way of asylum processing, but it also shows the importance of the entire immigration continuum being supplied and resourced in the manner in which it needs to.
Have there been any other bipartisan legislative breakthroughs like that in your time in office? You were at ICE. You were the chief of staff at ICE, right?
Yes, sir.
Did you have any bipartisan legislative breakthroughs while you were on the job like that?
No, sir. In many parts of the bill, you talk about the issues that we care about at ICE and CBP and others. There's many resources and capabilities within that legislation that would provide the ability to go after fentanyl, to go after drugs, to go after human smuggling, go after trafficking, and give our officers what they need.
So the real question is, do we want immigration solutions, border solutions, or do we just want problems to run against to divide the country and to try to polarize the situation? And do we want to do the bidding of Vladimir Putin, who obviously doesn't want us supporting our allies in Ukraine? And I noticed that the former President Trump basically invited Russia to march into any European country he wants at this point. So I think I admire the audacity and the courage of my colleagues for calling this hearing, but I am baffled why they think this is to their political advantage or to the benefit of the people of America. I yield back.
Mr. Timmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for letting me wave on to the subcommittee hearing. I am really just kind of shocked at what I just heard from the ranking member. This is one of the most ridiculous conversations I've ever had in Congress. For the last 3 years, President Biden has allowed millions and millions of people to cross the southern border illegally. The policies under Secretary Mayorkas have destroyed your cities, New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, San Francisco, in ruins because the amount of government benefits that are being absorbed by the millions of people that have crossed the southern border illegally are destroying your cities. Just 2 weeks ago, a Brooklyn school shut down. All the kids went remote because they didn't have any place to house immigrants. You have mayors screaming from the rooftops. Elected officials in Chicago recently said, we earned this. The progressives, their policies of open border of sanctuary cities have caused these problems. They said that. These are Democrats that are saying this. So now you say, well, we tried to fix it in the Senate, some bizarre deal that involved $100 billion plus to Ukraine, Taiwan, Israel, completely unrelated, for a little teeny step in the right direction for border security, which still allows 5,000 people every day to cross the southern border. That is not a solution to this problem. We need to secure the southern border. And by the way, We don't need legislation to do this. We don't. All that Biden has to do is undo what he did in the weeks after he got sworn in. He needs to end catch and release. He needs to reinstate remain in Mexico. He needs to continue funding border wall construction. Those are the first three things. I've been on the border 5 times in the last few years, and the last time I was there, the Customs and Border Patrol agent didn't say, we need more money. He said, we need to turn the spigot off. We have way, way too many people crossing the southern border, and the current policies in place do not allow them to process them effectively. We have no way of knowing who's coming into this country. It's outrageous. So for you to say that the Senate border deal was the solution and we're not serious about it, your party wouldn't even agree there was a problem until a couple months ago. And now that there's an election coming up, all of a sudden it's a problem and it's the Republicans' fault?
In any event, he says that all we needed to do was to execute the negotiated terms with Mexico. Again, I'm not quite sure what he's referring to. Donald Trump promised that he would build a wall and Mexico would pay for it. And I think on his first day in office, Mexico said that it wasn't going to pay for it. And of course, there's been no wall. And of course, that's not an answer to the problems we have. But there was an answer that was negotiated in the Senate. And in fact, the Republicans understood that we needed legislation. They passed legislation, H.R. 2. That's what I wanted to ask Mr. Hauser about, if I could just give him a second. Would H.R. 2 solve the problems of the country?
Sir, operationally, if you look at, from my personal belief, if you look at the restrictions on Border Patrol agents' ability to utilize technology, to utilize their resources to move migrants for processing, for screening, you look at the sort of mandatory detention that it would create across the southern border in soft-sided facilities that are extremely dangerous, as some of the congressmen mentioned earlier, in Arizona and some of these more desolate areas. You're actually creating the environment where Border Patrol, along with those agencies that support Border Patrol, to be pulled into just manning hundreds of thousands of people within soft-sided detention facilities, pulling those Border Patrol agents off the line, moving them away from the mission set of counterterrorism, counter-narcotics, human smuggling, human trafficking, and you create literal chaos in the aggregate within that bill if you actually put those restrictions on law enforcement officers in the manner in which that bill did.
Okay.
We're no more than 48 hours away from the fraudulent impeachment of the Secretary of Homeland Security, who was impeached simply for performing his legal duties under severe resource constraints. And this took place at the time that the Secretary was actually negotiating the successful bipartisan package in the Senate, which the Republicans then denounced and rejected. As we've proven time and again, House Democrats are ready to work with anyone to enact common sense legislation to address the decades-long broken immigration system. But the majority's just proven they don't want border solutions. They want border problems to run on because abortion is no longer available to them because Donald Trump packed the Supreme Court with his Federalist Society hacks. They destroyed Roe versus Wade. And when it went out to the public, what did they discover? America is a country that believes in freedom for women too. And from Kansas to Ohio to California to Maine, the people have been rejecting all of their anti-abortion tactics and attempts to pass a federal law criminalizing women's health care. Just yesterday, a 20-year veteran federal law enforcement officer from the U.S. Border Patrol told the Washington Examiner he's demoralized because Republicans in Congress are abandoning his agency and forcing it to fend for itself. The agent, a registered Republican, told the reporter that Republicans are now, quote, sheep in wolves' clothing, and that their inaction and passivity is akin to leaving a soldier in the missing of an ambush. When Trump was president, his policies put kids in cages, and his officials illegally spent appropriated federal dollars meant to provide care for vulnerable detainees on dog food and vision night goggles. We should take him at his word when he threatens further inhumane action and when he walks away from serious bipartisan legislation. To fix immigration, Congress needs to address it from the roots. As our witness, Mr. Hauser, stated, this problem neither starts nor ends at the border. People who migrate to the border do so at great peril. The question is why? What are they fleeing? And how can we be part of a solution that prevents them from having to make that deadly choice in the first place? I want to restate that we're ready to craft serious, bipartisan, humane policy solutions, the kind that Democrats and Republicans came up with in the Senate. We hope the House Republicans will remove themselves from the spell of Donald Trump and join us in doing serious legislation instead of just blowing everything up. And we hope that they decide to go this way fast. We have 3 legislative days before the government completely runs out of funding. And under our friends in the GOP, we've just been lurching from crisis to crisis. ICE is so strapped for cash, it's forced to make extremely difficult decisions right now. Let's do our jobs, let's get together, and let's get serious for the American people. I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Chairman, we're here because the madcap wild goose chase to impeach Joe Biden has produced no wild geese. Even Fox News is lampooning the fact that their own expert witnesses repeatedly say President Biden did nothing wrong and there are no grounds for impeachment. More than a dozen GOP members in Biden majority districts don't want to go anywhere near that fantasy production. What makes this farce a tragedy is that Secretary Mayorkas and the U.S. Senate have been working for months to achieve precisely the immigration and border compromise the GOP has been demanding. And miraculously, they got to a bipartisan immigration agreement for billions of dollars more in Border Patrol officers, immigration judges, fentanyl detection machines, a far tougher border. It was good enough for Senator Mitch McConnell and dozens of GOP senators, and it was good enough for the Wall Street Journal, but the House MAGAs would not take yes for an answer. Why? Because Donald Trump doesn't want a border solution. He wants a border problem, nothing else to run on. And Vladimir Putin certainly doesn't want $60 billion going to the heroic people of Ukraine, defying his filthy imperialist invasion. All over the world, democracy and freedom are under siege today, and all our colleagues can think to do is to sell out our Democratic allies and sell out the cause of human rights, and then impeach a cabinet secretary working diligently to solve the immigration problem that they claim to care about. I yield back. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Today our colleagues are using their first full committee hearing of the year to distract from the depressing reality that they failed to bring forward even a single piece of serious bipartisan legislation, much less a bipartisan bill to improve our immigration system and confront our major challenges on the southern border. The 118th Congress is shaping up to be one of the most unproductive in American history, with only 34 bills signed into law in 2023, a small fraction of the number typically enacted in a year. They simply have no program for America and just operate at the beck and call of Donald Trump. So with no positive program on infrastructure, healthcare, education, or anything else to run on, the do-nothing MAGA Republicans are hoping that simply demagoguing the issue of immigration while not addressing it in any serious way will be their ticket back to the White House. Then Trump can resume the real work that he wants to accomplish, pocketing for himself and his family tens of millions or billions of dollars from foreign governments like Communist China and the murderous monarchs of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, and so on. But they forget that, as with reproductive freedom, the American people have real values on immigration. America is a nation of immigrants, but it's also a nation of laws, and we must make America accessible for lawful immigration while we reduce and discourage unlawful immigration. So where's their plan?